Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride and I'm joined this evening by two excellent guests. Firstly by actor, writer, director Janette Foggo. Janette, how are you doing this evening?
I'm fine, thank you. Hi.
And on the other side of me we have another actor, another writer and a member of the Scottish Committee of Equity, Julie Coombe. Julie, how are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you yourself?
I'm not bad. Now, we have Julie and Janette here to talk about some issues that have been going on in equity in Scotland just today, mostly. But we will get to that after today's headlines. And we start, as we always do, with the coronavirus statistics update. So, as of 2 p.m. today, a total of 1,278,603 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK government regional testing centres. Of these, 1,170,165 were confirmed negative, 108,438 were positive. There were 689 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Scotland today, and sadly, 38 new reported deaths. This will, of course, be an underestimate of the total number of cases, as not everyone with the virus will show symptoms and not everyone will necessarily get themselves tested. As always, we urge you, if you are showing symptoms, please do book a test as soon as you can. Of the people who have tested positive, there were 1,031 people in hospital last night, 49 of whom were in intensive care. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 4,173. This number only includes those who have died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. And the latest UK daily figures published today show that 65,520 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from the illness, an increase of 612 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just those in hospitals. And as at the 13th of December, a total of 6,092 deaths have been registered in Scotland where the novel coronavirus was mentioned on the death certificate, according to statistics published by National Records of Scotland today. Between the 7th and 13th of December, 224 deaths were registered that mentioned COVID-19 on the death certificate, a decrease of 8 from the previous week. To place these numbers in context, the total number of all-cause deaths registered in the week was 1,276, which is 40 more than the average over the previous 5 years. NRS also published some analysis of risk factors. After adjusting for age, people living in the most deprived areas were 2.3 times as likely to die with COVID as those in the least deprived areas. This gap has increased in recent months. And of the 5,822 deaths involving COVID-19 between March and November, 93% had at least one pre-existing condition. The most common pre-existing condition was dementia and Alzheimer's. And after adjusting for age, there were 147 deaths involving COVID-19 per 100,000 population. Rates for males were significantly higher, representing 181 compared with 122 for females. And before we go on with the rest of today, if you would like to join in with the conversation here, you can join us on Twitter using the hashtag Scotland at 7 and following us at Broadcast Scot. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has joined with the leaders of the UK government and the Welsh government in issuing guidance on how the public should approach Christmas celebrations this year. The First Minister stressed that the strong recommendation of the Scottish Government to people across Scotland is to celebrate Christmas within your own household and in your own home, and as far as possible to keep any interaction with other households to a minimum. This is by far the safest way to spend this Christmas and keep loved ones safe. However, certain flexibilities were agreed in recognition of the impact of loneliness over Christmas on well-being and the fact that some people will not be willing to leave loved ones alone. These provide a window of opportunity and should be seen as a legal maximum to work well within. The guidance being issued seeks to reduce risks as far as possible for anyone choosing to use these flexibilities. The First Minister stressed that the following key points should be considered by anyone choosing to spend time with other households indoors. Keep the duration of any interaction as short as possible. Keep any bubble as small as possible. Avoid travel and overnight stays unless unavoidable. And comply with all distancing and hygiene advice. SNP MP Drew Hendry has been suspended from the House of Commons after refusing to sit down during a debate. The MP for Inverness, Nairn, Badenoch and Strathspey was taking part in the debate on the Internal Market Bill when, during a speech by Trade Minister Paul Scully, he began shouting that the bill was a democratic disgrace. Henry was told to sit down by Deputy Speaker Rosie Winterton, but he refused. Winterton then said that he was showing off, while other members said his behaviour was unacceptable. Winterton then named Henry, the term used in Westminster to describe the process of using an MP's name to discipline them. Earlier, the MP had said the internal market was the biggest assault on devolution in the history of the Scottish Parliament, and that the only reason for this bill as it stands is to demolish devolution. That internal market bill is expected to be passed into law in the House of Commons today. In response, Constitution Secretary Michael Russell said, "The UK government's determination to impose this damaging bill can only be viewed as a deliberate act of constitutional sabotage. It is proceeding despite the refusal of consent by the Scottish Parliament, the Welsh Parliament and the opposition of the Northern Ireland Assembly in direct contravention of the Sewell Convention, which is supposed to prevent the devolved parliaments having their powers altered without their agreement. The UK government has also ignored widespread opposition from business, trade unions, environmental and consumer groups and academics. The efforts by many members of the House of Lords to get the bill changed in a way that recognised devolution and the need to seek agreement rather than impose decisions was appreciated, but in the end the small concessions made by the UK government do not go nearly far enough to mitigate the damage the bill will do to devolution and to Scottish interests." The EU and UK are said to be in the final stretch of talks to keep trade flowing beyond December 31st, when the transition period ends. With just over 2 weeks left, Boris Johnson said that he hoped the EU would see sense and agree a deal that respected Britain's sovereignty, while German Chancellor Angela Merkel said the EU favoured an agreement. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen told the European Parliament, "I cannot tell you whether there will be a deal or not, but I can tell you that there is a path to an agreement now. The path may be very narrow, but it is there." Her relatively upbeat comments on the Brexit crisis helped nudge sterling upwards on currency markets. However, she also said that 2 issues still remained unresolved. "We have found a way forward on most issues, but 2 issues still remain outstanding: the level playing field and fisheries," she said. "Issues linked to governance now have largely been resolved. The next days are going to be decisive." Von der Leyen added that discussions about access to UK fishing waters for EU vessels were still very difficult. SNP Westminster leader Ian Blackford MP has called on the Prime Minister to release a detailed economic impact assessment of his extreme Tory Brexit plans. It follows the publication of the Warwick study, which estimates Scotland has already lost £4 billion as a result of Brexit, and Scottish Government analysis, which estimates that people in Scotland will be an average of £1,600 worse off. Bloomberg Economics also estimates that the UK will have lost £200 billion by the end of this year. Commenting, Ian Blackford MP said, "In the last few hours, the President of the European Commission said that the next few days are going to be decisive in the Brexit negotiations. With just 2 weeks to go, it is a disgrace that businesses and people have been left with this crippling uncertainty and the real threat of food and medicine shortages." Commenting on the first figures showing uptake of the coronavirus vaccine, Health Secretary Jeane Freeman has said, "This is a very good start, with 18,644 people vaccinated between the 8th and 13th of December as part of the national COVID-19 vaccination programme. This is the biggest logistical exercise in the history of vaccination, and my sincere thanks go to everyone who has worked to get us going and will continue our delivery. My thanks go to those who have had the vaccine, given the vaccine, and those involved in the planning and delivery of this remarkable effort. We are providing the vaccine to people on a priority basis, as set out by the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, and we will work through to reach other groups as quickly as vaccine supply allows, and I hope other vaccines are approved. In the meantime, it remains vital that we all stick to the published restrictions and follow public advice to keep suppressing the virus to as low a level as possible." A new groundbreaking technology to detect bowel cancer is being used today at the NHS Louisa Jordan Hospital in Glasgow. NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde and NHS Lanarkshire are the latest health boards to open clinics as part of the ScotCap programme. NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde's clinic opened today at the NHS Louisa Jordan, following on from clinicians from NHS Lanarkshire who examined patients at NHS Louisa Jordan using a tiny camera inside a pill on the 11th of December. Scotland's colon capsule endoscopy service, known as ScotCap Clinics, will help detect bowel cancer earlier and cut waiting times. The new technology is expected to help health boards tackle the backlog of patients, reduce waiting times, and ensure patients get either relief or a vital diagnosis. More than 100 new policies and proposals to support Scotland's green recovery and help deliver a just transition to net zero have been launched. They form part of the Climate Change Plan 2018 to 2032, which has been updated to reflect the world's most ambitious framework of climate targets as enshrined in Scotland's Climate Change Act 2019. The plan, which also increases the ambition of more than 40 other policies to cut greenhouse gas emissions across all sectors, includes over £400 million of investment in low carbon, hydrogen and carbon capture technology, as well as targets for zero emission housing, reducing private car use, and more ecologically sound land use. Ian Blackford MP has been unanimously re-elected as the SNP's Westminster leader, a year on from the party's general election success. At its annual general meeting, held virtually, the 47-strong group of SNP MPs backed Mr Blackford and his deputy Kirsten Oswald MP. Commenting, Ian Blackford said, "I'm delighted to have the continued support of my colleagues to lead the SNP group. It has been an honour and a privilege to lead the SNP Westminster group for the past 3.5 years. We have an incredibly hard-working and talented group of MPs, and I'm very grateful for their support." And finally, the story that we've got Janette and Julie here to talk about. Scotland's unique culture and arts scene must have full trade union representation, Scottish Green Culture spokesperson Ross Greer has said. The comments come after Scottish actors and theatre workers launched a petition begging their union, Equity, to reverse a decision to axe staff working for members in Scotland and Northern Ireland. Over 1,000 Scottish actors have signed it, including former cast members of Still Game and River City. Equity's new General Secretary Paul Fleming has indicated that Northern Ireland will no longer have an officer and will be controlled directly from London, while the office in Scotland will run at reduced capacity. Staffing in Wales is also set to be cut. None of these decisions were taken in consultation with members. Commenting, Scottish Green's culture spokesperson Ross Greer said, "Scotland has a unique culture and world-famous arts sector of its own, one whose existence is threatened by pandemic restrictions and by Brexit. In this time of crisis, Equity's members need effective representation more than ever. So for the UK leadership of the union to axe jobs and weaken its offices in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland is shocking. It's certainly not the behaviour of a union that works for its members, who I understand were not even consulted." This has to be seen in the wider political context too, as Scotland is dragged out of the EU and the UK government seeks to control over our affairs. Too often, Scottish culture is devalued and actors made to feel as though they must go to London to succeed. Their trade union should be standing against that London bias, not enabling it. So, Julie, let me come to you first on this. For people who don't know very much about the acting world, tell us first a wee bit about what Equity does and how it represents its members, because obviously with an industry like acting, a normal trade union is not, well, a normal trade union way of working wouldn't work for actors. So just tell us a wee bit about what Equity does.
Well, I mean, Equity is a trade union first and foremost, and it used to be a closed shop, but obviously it stopped being a closed shop, I think, when I graduated about 1992. And you used to have your card to work, but you don't anymore. I've always been a member of a trade union. When I worked for the civil service before I went to drama school, I'm a great believer in solidarity, in standing together and looking after one another. So it seemed absolutely natural that I would go into Equity. So Equity does look after actors, it looks after directors, it looks after Stage managers, if you want to, they have a union that they have other unions they can join. But basically, Equity broker agreements with theatres, with any recorded media. They are there to advise. They are there to police things, if you like, make sure that agreements are being adhered to. They're always fighting for rights for us as our workers, and they look after variety artists. They basically look after you. You get personal and public liability insurance, and you get help with legal claims should you need it. I've just always been a great advocate of membership, because I think when you are self-employed, which we all are, all you have is your union. And I've always advised everybody, every young person, to go into Equity. And that's why what's happening at the moment is just so disappointing.
And as you say, it used to be a closed shop. It used to be that virtually everybody working in the industry had to be a member. It's not now, but is membership still, pretty common amongst working actors?
Yes, membership is at 48,000 actually. In Scotland, we have 2,500 members. Northern Ireland is 500, but there's 48,000 members. We're kind of at an all-time high, which is brilliant. And I think people are realising that it is an asset to be part of a trade union.
So tell us a wee bit about what's happened this week. There have been redundancies made in the Scottish Equity Office, but there are some new roles being recruited in London, which is part of the reason that some people are quite upset about this. So tell us just a wee bit about what's happened and how people are reacting.
Well, there's a new general secretary, as you said in the press statement, Kenny. Paul Fleming. He's a young, bright man. He's worked for Equity for a good few years. He was elected in, I think it was June or July this year, and took up the post in October. Paul has set about restructuring the union. The senior management team are now called the Secretariat, which I'm not that fond of, but some people may like it. And Paul's basic argument is that Equity needs to save money. So we'll come to that later, whether Equity do need to save money or not. We'll come to that. But in a nutshell, what he's doing is he is making some people redundant, not just in Scotland. So other people are going. Some people are going voluntarily. Other posts are being the post won't exist anymore, but there'll be another sort of amalgamated post. It's all the sort of typical things that happen during restructuring. But basically what affects us in Scotland and Northern Ireland is that we will lose one organiser. We have two at the moment, and we have what's called an R&R post, which is recruitment and retention. But our Equity office has always had 3 people because we look after Northern Ireland. But one of those posts will go, one of the organisers will go. And that's just a done deal. So Northern Ireland will then be centralised, which is a very scary word, not very nice for Scots to hear, or I would imagine the Northern Ireland. I think there's a bit of a strong feeling over there as well. Our colleagues are up in arms. So that's going to be run out of London by the General Secretary himself. Which I'm not sure how he's going to have enough time to do it, but that's what he's going to do. It's a compulsory redundancy, the post that we're losing here, which I just think beggars belief within a trade union. Nothing that our new General Secretary does or is going to do seems to be, he doesn't seem to want to put it in front of the members. He's not doing anything wrong. He is, he's backed by council, but his manifesto was full of how this was a member-led union, and he has never once gone to the members with anything. So it broke at the weekend that we were losing a much loved member of staff. And it doesn't actually matter whether the staff member is much loved. We're losing a member of staff. We're using a third of our representation, and it broke, and the circumstances started to become open knowledge, common knowledge, and people are not happy. People are incensed, and I'm incensed. And I can completely understand that. And so it's now kind of growing arms and legs. And that's where we are just now. There are statements flying back and forward, and it's not finished yet. It's only beginning.
Well, let me just turn to Janette and bring you in, Janette. How are you feeling about this? Is this something that you kind of saw coming? Is this come out of the blue? Is that how was your reaction to what's happened in the last few days?
I think, given that the specific person that is being made redundant, I think you would long and wide to find a Scottish actor or an actor working in Scotland of any age whose career has not been affected by Lorne positively, who has not either been in touch with him directly at some point, or had worked with a contract that he has helped negotiate, or has had circumstances explained, or has been able to make go to him to get help with any kind of situation. And losing somebody with that breadth and depth of knowledge and understanding of how things work here is a huge blow. I mean, one of the experiences I had with Lorne was Spotlight, the casting directory. They post links to different jobs and stuff. And a few years ago, they posted a link on behalf of Unison trade union, who were casting an advertisement for their trade union, and they were looking for actors. And in the advert, kind of, we're looking for actors, blah, 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 non-equity. Now, that doesn't mean they don't want equity members. It means that they're not going to pay equity rates. So I saw this and I thought it was a bit kind of off. And I contacted Lorne immediately and said, I think that's outrageous that a trade union is asking another trade union members to work below union rates. And he dealt with it, and it was sorted in, I don't know, a day, 2 days. He contacted Unison, he contacted other people, and it was sorted, and the post was re-advertised as an equity. Now, those are actors, whoever did that, didn't affect me personally, but whoever did that job, they were better paid because of that kind of involvement. I've never known anybody who couldn't contact Lorne and say, I'm not quite sure. A lot of actors don't have agents, for instance. So they go for an interview, they get a job, they get a contract, and they look at it and they go, I'm not sure about this. And so Lorne would be a person that you would contact to say, is this right? Can you explain this to me? He's, I think, known by everybody. I think one of the problems, though, that's a personal statement on somebody's behalf. And I don't think anybody at Equity in London would want to quibble about any of that. But also, there is the issue about centralising representation. At the moment, the idea that given everything else that's happening in the bigger world, COVID, which is one of the prime movers of this, the kind of loss of money and income, but also Brexit and all of that, the idea that you would then further centralise people's representation, that you would have that the understanding that is developed by people working in any area, I find it kind of extraordinary. But then I think, well, if that was the case, if anybody can do a job from anywhere, why don't you move one of the lists? I think there's 4 or 5 different offices in London, because it has such a huge population and it's very theatrical and loads of actors. Why not move one of those offices to Glasgow? Because people working in Glasgow would not understand the specific requirements of working in London, for actors working in London, but that works in all directions. And I think, one of the things of the whole kind of COVID thing is COVID hasn't been the thing that has caused all the fractures in our society and unions and stuff. What it has done is revealed the problems that are already there, and that we are trying so hard, people are trying so hard to deal with. And this feels like, at this particular time, when people are struggling so hard to find ways of working, and so many people are being really creative about getting stuff online and doing pantomimes and all of that, to suddenly kind of have things centralised at this exact moment, you're going, it feels very uncomfortable to me. I mean, and I'm an actor. I worked in London for a long time. I lived in London. I used to attend equity meetings down there. But it feels to me like a very, very a poor decision, poor judgment at the moment. You might want to wait 6 months and still make the same decision when people are more confident and people are feeling better able to move forward and change stuff. But right now at this moment, it feels to me like it feels like kind of let's just do it now, get it over with. And I think it means that for people in Scotland, actors in Scotland, you kind of go, well, who is there representing us who knows as much as that? Because experience and knowledge alongside younger people coming up is just hugely important.
Yeah. Well, Janette, I mean, you've raised several issues there, and I want to touch for a wee minute on the kind of state of where the industry is just now, because as you said, COVID has exposed a lot of problems. There's a lot of insecure work in the industry, obviously. A lot of short-term work. There's not necessarily a salary that can come in. There's not a way to furlough actors, for example. So how has the union itself been during the pandemic? Has there been a lot of support coming from Equity for Actors and other members during the pandemic?
Well, I think there is. I mean, I think Julie can talk about this probably with much more expertise than I can. But there have been, I think, there are lots of like services and provision that people can contact, I guess, online, face to face. I think for many actors, there are big kind of like mental health issues and health issues. If you're not earning, if you can't work, it's a very social, it's a job that you basically can't do on your own. You always have to do it with other people. And I think for many actors, there have been huge challenges in just dealing with not actually being in that kind of space with other people. For actors, directors, there are many stage management who are being made redundant at the moment, which is kind of another shocker. And I suppose for all of us, the concern is when you lose teams of people who really understand the job, know how to make stuff, know how to get things done, how to get a show, up and running in 4 days. I mean, I'm not talking about rehearsals, but like a production week and stuff. Mm-hmm. When they go from a building and from a company or an organization, they are incredibly difficult to replace. So it's like if you went into a hospital and removed 15 or 20 consultant physicians. Who knows what they as much as they know, and I think for a lot of us there is quite a lot of anxiety about what will happen to our industry as it moves forward. Coming out of COVID, suddenly there will be all these gaps. How do we fill them? Do you just go back and re-employ people? And I think we're all trying as hard as we can to be as creative as possible at thinking what the future will look like. But I think Equity has provided quite a lot of support. I don't know about financial support. I can't speak about that. I've been doing another job, so that's not been a big issue for me. But I know I've had a few letters and you get a lot of emails and stuff about if you need assistance, if you need to talk to people, they do have phone lines, they do have consultations and counselling to help people. But I'm guessing that for the biggest issue is being how do you rebuild something when this is over? And that takes the energy and hopefulness and, let's do a show here of young people, but it also takes the knowledge and experience of older people who go, well, I know a guy, and when you lose representatives from your union, because the union is the group that brings everybody together, that becomes much harder. And it's not that the people who are there will not do a good job, but there is also that sense of do we have is our artistic creative world different? And I don't mean better, I mean literally different. Do we have a clear voice of our own? And if we do have a clear voice of our own, then that has to be heard. And I
Well,
feel
let
like
me.
for people in Northern Ireland, is suddenly going to be represented by somebody who's nothing to do in Northern Ireland. Well,
Yeah.
they have a very clear and different cultural structure as well.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Well, no,
carry
no,
on.
no, it's fine. Let me come to you then, Julie. I
Yeah.
I heard a rant from Tom Cruise just this week,
Ah,
furious at someone on the set of Mission Impossible, the new Mission Impossible film, for breaking their COVID protocols, and he was talking about how, this is the industry is at risk. The whole industry could collapse under the weight of what's happened with COVID. How serious a risk is that to theatre, film, TV production in Scotland just now?
well, it is obviously it's a massive risk because it's a risk to everything. I mean, bizarrely, it's our recorded media department within equity. They're kind of snowed under at the moment because a lot of things are coming back. A lot of things are getting back filming with COVID protocols in place. So theatre is lagging behind because it's live, obviously, and with social distancing, can you actually make any money? Um, but things. I'm a firm believer that art will out. Art will find a way. And what Janette was saying about young people, come on, let's do it. Let's do the show right here. And the expertise and knowledge and experience of older people, we will. There's no way to keep art in a box. There's no way to stop it. We have to do it. It's something. It's a basic human need.
Mm.
The desire to perform, the desire to be in a theatre with other people, enjoying a brilliant play or a gig or something. There's no way that we're going to be prepared to give that up. But we just need a few steady hands on the tiller to get us through this storm. I mean, if I can, Kenny, I'd just like to pick up a few wee stats that Jeanette,
Sure.
when Jeanette said Julie could tell you a little bit more about it. Equity have a benevolent fund, and there's also a fund in Equity called the Unknown Funds. Which is exactly as it says. Members can apply for to do a one-off project if it will benefit themselves or other members. But the decision was taken to put that into the benevolent fund, and that was £1 million, and that has been used up. But that has been, people have applied and they have been given money to just help them live. Because a lot of our members slipped through the cracks with the self-employed schemes. So Equity were really on top of that. There has been a 24-hour mental health line, which I know people have been very grateful for. The staff in Scotland, so obviously Scotland, Northern Ireland, they've been on call 24/7. They have been available. They would never not take your call. And as a union, we have fought. In fact, there's a motion gone down to council just recently about redundancies that have been made sort of under the cover of COVID while furlough still exists. And we have fought against that. And we have said we do not accept that you would make anybody redundant while there is still government money available for furlough. And that's now the position that we find ourselves in with our beloved member of staff, because Lauren is, in fact, I don't think the other two members of staff will mind me saying this because they're fantastic as well. But in Scotland, Lauren is Equity. And he has now been made redundant, and there is still furlough money that would keep him in a job until April, and it's just not happening. And I think it's absolutely indefensible.
So, what are you expecting members to do? I mean, we've seen some actors, Ian Robertson, we saw earlier saying that he was going to resign from Equity. I believe a couple of other actors echoed that as well. Is that kind of thing likely to become a big issue that Equity then has to try and respond to, or is that kind of reaction likely to be quite muted?
Well, there is, obviously, you mentioned the petition, Kenny, and the
Hmm.
petition does have over 1,000 signatures. We are still pushing it. Um, I think any kind of resignation obviously would be incredible. If we managed to do it in a coordinated manner, would be very symbolic. That I don't think anybody really wants to do that. When we had our committee meeting with our General Secretary on Monday, and he did not get an easy time. He really did not. Believe you me, anybody who's watching it, I think it was pretty brutal. No, I don't think it was pretty brutal. And at one point, one of our committee members said to him, the only thing we want is for this decision to be reversed. And I think that's what the majority of actors in Scotland and equity members that's the outcome they desire as well. So we'll see. There has been a statement from our president today, Maureen Beattie, and there's been an explainer. I'm not. I know what it is, but I've never really heard that before. There's been an explainer put out from our General Secretary. It's all figures. He likes his figures. It's all figures. There's not much humanity in it. But we'll see. It doesn't look as though the decision is going to be reversed. So we're going to have to think of other courses of action. We're going to have to think of whether it is a mass resignation. What would that do? Where does that leave us? Do we leave a union? Or do we stay and try and effect change from within? But people are angry, and I'm glad people are angry. I really am glad, because I'm angry and the whole committee is angry, and we're not going to stop. So whether it's mass resignation or symbolic things, I mean, we're getting the politicians involved. It's only beginning.
And just speaking of politicians, obviously it's politicians that decide how to direct financial support for different sectors. What's been your feeling about the way the Scottish Government and the UK Government have treated the sector?
Both have been a little bit tardy. I mean, I spoke about this there's a panto parade thing at Equity, and I spoke on behalf of Scotland there, basically outlining the things that had been done differently here in Scotland than in England and the UK, the four nations. The Scottish Government did come out with the newly self-employed thing, which meant more of our members, because the young graduates and things, they could access that. So it has been better, but there is still a long way to go. And actually, I'm very proud of the Scottish Government, because they came out first with their bailout. They got in there, and I think probably prompted Westminster to make the bailout. So very proud of that. But with everything, the arts tends to be quite low. I mean, I don't know if Janette would agree with this, but it can be low down the list of priorities when you're fighting a pandemic, and you've got Brexit coming, and I think it has been better, but there's still an awful lot to do, and we're going to need sustained support for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, well, let me turn to Janette on that. Janette, how have you been feeling about the way that the UK government and the Scottish government, the kind of interplay between those two in supporting the sector? And following up on what Julie was saying, what kind of support would you be hoping for going into 2021?
Well, people always talk about the arts as being like some kind of thing, like, oh, it's kind of lovely, isn't it? It's really nice. And gosh, we love our world-beating, actors and stage managers and stuff. But if you want to talk hard numbers, I kind of looked this up a couple of years ago because I got in an argument with somebody else. And the creative industries, and that's the creative industries, that's filmmaking, publishing, theatre, music, and everything associated with it, is worth £90 billion a year to the British economy. So I would say, and it's 1 in 11 jobs also are employed in the creative industries. So that's about 9% of all jobs. And that's across the board. That's not all actors. That's actors, stage managers, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, people who work front of house, people who work in bars and restaurants, and all connected, libraries, everything. So that's like 9% roughly of all jobs. So I would say we should be supported commensurately with our contribution, basically, like any other industry. Because actually, the creative industries will come back. It's not like we suddenly gone, oh, we've discovered electricity, so we don't need gas lamps anymore. The creative industries will come back, because we need them. Like hospitality will come back. So I would say we should be supported commensurate with what we actually contribute. And interestingly, a lot of people who will go, well, I just think there's more important things to spend money on at the moment. You say to them, what have you been doing during lockdown? And they say, oh, well, I've been reading a lot. I did a painting course online. I've been watching films and television. I caught up with lots. I've been listening to the radio. Oh my God, the music I've listened to. You go, well, yeah. And who does all of that? Who makes all of that? So I might say you could support us on the basis of how what creative people have done has actually kept the nation sane.
Yeah.
Do you know, it's kept us out. I mean, because actual fact, in terms of like mental health, and I think, look at things like there's so many people. When I'm not acting, I work with people with learning difficulties, and they do lots of different activities. They do dance classes and music and all sorts of stuff. Creative, you know, at the Kelvin Grove Art Gallery, they go to art classes, which are really interesting and really terrific. And a lot of those things have carried on online, which those organizations like Independence and Paragon and that, they have organized and done all that themselves. Now, some of those companies are supported, they get funding, some people don't. But a lot of those things, being able to do those online has actually kept people sane. You know, people go into a little dance group. There's a one I haven't actually got around to doing, but 10 o'clock every morning for 15 minutes. They send a link out and lots of people do that and they get together kind of with other people. And so I would say support us commensurate with what we actually contribute. And it's not all about Hamilton in the West End. What we do with everybody is you know, how many books have people read and filmed? You know, and I kind of go like, you know, once you actually run out of all the stuff that's already on Netflix, and you actually are watching the 15th rerun of Dad's Army, maybe, you know, maybe at that point you say, well, you know, if you want it, you have to pay for it. If you want the kind of quality of acting, of production standards, amazing costumes, makeup, whatever, you have to pay for it. You have to kind of say, and it has a value, but it has this huge emotional and psychological value as well when people can actually do stuff, you know, watch something, listen to something, communicate with somebody else about it, you know.
Now, one of the other
And I
things that
think
Ross
there's a lot
Greer
of
raised in this story that we read earlier, he mentioned the idea of London as this kind of centre to which everything goes, and that there was a concern about Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales not getting the support that they needed. So, Julie, let me come back to you. How big an issue is that for artists, actors, musicians, whatever, in Scotland? The kind of pool of London with the BBC, with the West End. How big of a drain is that on the scene in Scotland?
I think all the devolved nations have a really good scene. Actually, things are a lot better than you think. I think it's a slightly old fashioned thing that they have to go to London. You know, I know there was a producer of High Road years ago called Robert Love who used to say if they were any good, they would be in London. Thankfully, that has changed a little bit. I mean, obviously, there still is, you know, there is more opportunity, but there are far more people in London. But there has been a drive to get things made. Look, Wales, look at Cardiff, the BBC, you know, Doctor Who, Torchwood, all these fabulous things being made there. You know, we've got things going on here. We've got Outlander, and you know, we've got River City as our continuing drama, and we've got lots of things being made. Shetland, all that kind of thing, and Ireland have got a great going scene as well. I think because of the uniqueness of the nations, you know, that's wonderful. That's one thing. That's aside. But what we find actually is that there is still a sort of imperialist notion of the bigger country knowing how to do things a bit better. And they've got a few more wheel Kent faces, if you like. And within the industry, when things are getting made here, they tend to cast the larger roles, shall we say, uh, down south and we'll kind of pick up the scraps. So there's been a bit of a drive on, and in fact, this is something that ties back into what's going on in equity at the moment. We had one of our vice presidents, Linda Rook, came to our committee meeting, and she said, "I'm all about the nations, all about the nations. What do you want?" We said, "We want more things cast here. We want it done." "Oh, yes, 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 yes." So does this not go against that? At Northern Ireland getting centralised and Scotland being diminished? Because surely if you're going to commit to things being made here and cast here, and the scene encouraged to thrive here, you need to throw resources at it, not take resources away. Mm-hmm. So I think there has to be a commitment to not pulling everything back to London or London dominating the nations. The nations are very unique and should be allowed to flourish. And actually, we're very good at things in the nations. We've got wonderful technicians and we've got wonderful actors, and we should be supported and helped to flourish rather than dominated. And that is exactly what's happening in equity just now. We're being dominated by a general secretary who just wants to make himself king in the midden. He wants to be king in the midden in Northern Ireland, and he wants to be king in the midden everywhere. And quite frankly, we don't need a king in the midden. So, sorry about that.
Well, Janette, let me come back to you. Kind of related, looking forward for the next few years, say, how would you like to see the acting business, the industry develop in Scotland? Is there anything you think we need to be looking at doing?
In the future, well, I think the main thing, I suppose, in the next 5 years is going to be how we come out of the whole COVID situation and how we find ways of restructuring within buildings. We have all these extraordinary buildings, which are, theatre buildings, and how do we restructure within them to have people able to come and be together? Because even with a vaccine, we still have this virus around. So how long will it go on that we have to distance within theatre buildings? I think I'd like to see we just kind of be a backward step. But I guess like when I started, like you would join a company and you would be there for a while. And I think having a range of experience, I'd like theatre to be more writer and actor led. But I think financially, we have to say this is something, we have to be able to make the case for ourselves that, and as a friend of mine, Peter Arnott, writer, says that we deserve to survive. I think we do. And I think looking at what has happened during COVID and what I was saying before about what everybody has done to survive, we need to actually say this is we have to make the case that actually we're essential to how our society culturally goes forward, progresses. And that's theatre, music, cinema, radio, visual arts, all of that. That is actually at the heart of who we are culturally, and that needs to be supported. And then in actual fact, that the permeation out from that in terms of skills and trades and training, it's not all about people being arty. There are all the other skills, that in a theatre or on a film set are just extraordinary. And so I suppose I would say they put some money into in helping people, making people understand that how central and how integral to our society it is, because it is a bleak world, a place without arts where you can't go to. I mean, I know kind of at the moment, I miss being able to just go into Kelvin Grove. I used to quite regularly, if I'm up the West End, used to kind of like wander in for an hour, go and see a few things, sling a couple of quid in the box and leave. And so the idea that like these are all, they're all institutions, but it's what they are that matters. And we need to, that's what I would put a lot of money into investing in that, and investing in that sense of, and maybe actually re-exploring the whole idea of ownership, public ownership of of these institutions and theatres, cinema, whatever, that people feel like they own it, that it belongs to them, and that actually what we do in those buildings has helped them to survive this terrible time. It's not been the only thing, but I think for a lot of people it has been hugely important. And I think people in their minds often, they separate out, say things like reading. They kind of go, yeah, well, I don't really watch television. I read. You go, well, that's great. Who wrote the books? Do you know, who are they? And who publishes? And so, yeah, I think it's maybe a huge imaginative enterprise as well. Because I think for everybody coming out of this, it's the interesting thing in a way about the whole COVID situation is that it's everywhere and everything throughout the world. So it's not like you're fighting against the tide. In a way, you could say, well, actually, this tide is for everybody. So there's no reason why we shouldn't go, okay, let's make something really different. And that goes into kind of things like trade unions, which part of my feeling about trade union, about equity and other kind of organisations, is that often they become more importantly and more devotedly about the institution of the union than they are about the members. So they're more interested in about how do we support the union? And sometimes you're going, don't think about supporting the union. What about this young actor here who's in a state, can't pay the rent this week? Do you know? So maybe I think we need to think more about that. So forget about worrying about like massive institutions. Go, every single person in the world is part of this pandemic, and so we need to all find ways to move together and recognise what we all do, what we all contribute. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm just aware that we don't have very long left, so I do want to end this on an optimistic note. So I'm going to come back to you, Julie, just now, and then I'll come back to you in a minute, Janette. What are you optimistic about? What is there happening in the drama world in Scotland that you're excited about just now?
Well, I think Janette touched on this earlier on. I think some of our theatres have found incredibly creative ways to get Christmas shows to audiences. And I think that is very exciting, and I'm so proud of all of my colleagues. I know that on a personal level, I've written a new show that was supposed to go out on 2 tours this year, and it just got shunted into next year. So I'm excited for that to happen. I'm actually quite excited to have the vaccine and have everybody else vaccinated so that we can actually get out there and do it. I've said right from the beginning, and I think Janette was so eloquent about the whole COVID thing and about just how essential we are. And Peter Arnott, he should be the King of Scotland. He's just great. But, I think we are essential. And I've always said we will not just survive, we will thrive. And you can see the green shoots poking through already. And I'm just excited about that. I'm actually excited about 2021 because 2020 can do one.
Well, let me turn back to you then, Janette. Once we do say goodbye to this year, what are you excited about seeing next year?
To be honest, I would be excited to see if we can find, given our extraordinary and erratic weather, how we use outside spaces. So say companies like Bard and the Botanic, who I've worked with a couple of times, they seem to me like a company that we should look at and invest in because they work outside. They do their shows in the gardens. They do big shows on a little budget. They're not particularly, they don't get a lot of funding. They're very dependent on people who turn up and all of that. But actually, how do we use other spaces? Supposing we had another rerun of COVID in, 2 years' time. How much time do we spend in this next year looking at how do we use the spaces outside our buildings? The gardens or at the tramway, the hidden gardens at the back there, and that sort of interests me for this next year to see how much we would be prepared, every company, to work together to explore that. And I mean, David Gregg said a very funny thing on Twitter a few months ago during all of this, saying that, oh God, don't you wish that the Romans had made a better job of conquering Scotland, and they would have left us all these wonderful stone amphitheatres to perform in. But then actually, you look at the space outside the Lyceum and the Usher Hall and down to the Trav, and you go, well, actually, there is a kind of natural amphitheatre there, do you know? Or there's one at Dalkeith, or there are lots of, so how do we, maybe that's what would excite me, is like, how do we break the back of feeling that we have to do things in a certain way and get back to that? But how do we get to re-exploring and bring it, you know, there's a company at the moment doing a pantomime off the back of a truck in Skye. And I kind of go, brilliant. There are companies in London where people are going down the streets and singing opera to people at their front doors. So I guess I find that quite exciting, the idea of how we genuinely remake the idea of performance and theatre and storytelling, music, whatever, and saying, well, if we can't do it inside, we will find a way to do it outside. We'll find a way to kind of bring people together in a different space, because, you know, that's what they always used to do. I mean, you know, in the original days, created, like, you know, Euripides and stuff. Do you know what I mean? So I guess I find that quite exciting. The idea that we might actually be more all embracing of each other and each other's capacities.
Well, it does. I mean, there's so much more we could have talked about, but we are just about out of time. So I would like to thank Janette and Julie very much for joining us. It's been really interesting talking to both of you. And we'd like to thank you at home for joining us as well. There would be no point in us being here at all if not for you. So thank you very much for being with us. We do have to ask, if you're able to support Broadcasting Scotland financially, then please do go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register and sign up there as a supporter. Your £5 a month is what keeps us on the air here. So do please do that if you can. We are also, of course, running a crowdfunder. We're aiming to employ some staff, including an editor and some journalists. So if you're able to support that, maybe with just a one-off donation, then you can go to broadcastingscotland.scot/donate. If you're not able to support us financially, we absolutely understand. The shows will always be free to view online, but you can still make a big difference. You can help market us. Follow us on Twitter at Broadcast Scot, like our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, find us on the Amazon Fire Stick, and then please do share the shows around with your friends and family. Encourage them to give Broadcasting Scotland a try. Let them know why you think we are worth watching. And finally, we mentioned staff there, but we are also looking for lots of volunteers throughout the country to help us cover the whole of Scotland better than we do now. So if you're interested in getting involved in any way, wherever you are in the country, do please get in touch. We'd absolutely love to hear from you. But that is absolutely all we have time for this evening. So once again, thank you very much to Julie Coombe and to Janette Foggo. Gordon will be back tomorrow at 7 for another Scotland at 7. I will be back at the same time on Friday. So until then, thanks very much for joining us and have a great evening. Good night.
The Catalans, the Basques, the Galicians in the Basque.
An independent future for Scotland.
How quickly do you think a referendum can be arranged?
Best practice demands that it should be 6 months.
Just looking at the overall share numbers for Scotland at the moment, the SNP 46.4%.